Good Monday morning. Let's see how we can create a simple serverless application using the Freshworks deprecator of the FDK. So in this video, we will see how we can use the FDK to generate a simple serverless app, and we will make use of product events to call a third-party API whenever a new ticket is getting created. We will use installation parameters or iParams to obtain the API endpoint for our application. And not only that, we'll also see how we can pack and deploy our application to our Freshdesk account. But before we begin, here are some prerequisites. We need to have the Freshworks developer kit, we need to have the trial account for Freshdesk, and with a bit of JavaScript and Node.js skills, we can get started. Let me switch to my terminal and let me execute the FDK create command. And as you can see here, and as you might have seen in the previous videos, I'm going to choose a product, Freshdesk, and this time I'm going to choose the serverless app template, and this has the app created. And to our left pane, we could see that the boilerplate app is created. We would notice that this is a little bit different from the front-end app that we created. So the difference starts with the manifest.json. As you can see here, we have the product and the product name, but we have an empty object here. But in the terms of front-end application, we would have placeholder information and the view file, which is usually HTML file, and the icon. So all of that is missing in the serverless manifest.json file, and this is completely valid manifest.json for a serverless application. And the other thing that you would notice is the missing app directory, so there wouldn't be an app directory in a complete serverless application. Instead, you would have a server directory which contains these files. The server.js contains the logic that will be executed by the Lambda, and as you can see here, it's a Node.js script that will get invoked, and you have the logic for that here as well. So if you notice here a little bit, you would notice that we have product events and listeners for the product events as well. Other than that, you can look at the test data, which contains the mock event payloads for testing our app locally, and we have the live folder where we can have the library files as well. And you might remember this config directory from our previous videos, which contain the iParams.json, which are used to store the installation parameters. So you'll see how to generate them as well. So just because there is no app folder doesn't mean that apps, Freshdesk or Freshworks apps cannot have both front-end and serverless applications at the same time. Actually, they could have both front-end and serverless component at the same time. So in this case, it's just the serverless part, but it's completely possible to have both front-end and serverless part in your application at the same time. And we'll see much more examples of that soon. So let's run the application. So I'll go to my terminal, and I will use the FDK run command to run the application. And special emphasis to the content which is shown on the terminal. As you can see here, we have the local testing server started usually, and with the standard message and all of that, and a special message for serverless application. FDK is more of a simulator when it comes to serverless applications. So you can actually simulate the product events, the app setup events, and external events, and all of that using the simulator interface, which is provided by the FDK. So for example, if I click on this link, it will take me to the simulator page, which looks like this. And I can select an event, which is a valid product event in Freshdesk. And I'll have the mock payload presented here. So if I hit simulate, this would send the payload back to our application as if our application is running inside the product in a productive environment. So if you look at the mock payload which is presented here, this payload would correspond to the payload that the product sends to our application if it were running productively. And since this payload matches with that of the one that is sent by the product, we can almost test immediately the effect of the product events on our application without having to run the app or install the app in our account. So this is a much faster alternative to having to pack our application and deploy them every single time. And as you can see here, the app reacts as it would in a production scenario, where in this case we output the name of the requester, and that is shown in the console as well. Now that we have a very simple serverless application, we can now add the logic to make a call to a third-party API from our application. So I'll probably jump back to my documentation and then refer to the serverless features. And remember, certain features are common between the frontend and the serverless application. So in which case, since I need to make a API call to a third-party API, I'll probably reuse the request API. And if we look at the documentation for request API, it shows the usage for both frontend as well as the serverless part of the backend. So I can just copy this URL and then I can paste it in the handler for onTicketCreate. As you can see here, the code is pretty much self-explanatory and it's easy to understand. So if you look at line 4, we have this event onTicketCreate and its corresponding callback onTicketCreate handler is defined. So basically we can have multiple product events defined here. So they will go as objects and with the corresponding callbacks. So this is a part of the array which is assigned to the events property. So in this case, since we are focusing on onTicketCreate, what we have done here is for every new ticket that is getting created, we tell the app to call this logic over here. And if you notice, the function has args. So the argument contains the payload, which in turn contains the information associated with the new ticket which is getting created. And as a bonus, the args parameter also has the iParams that are present in the application. So based on which we'll make a call to a third-party API. So in this case, we'll use RequestBin, and we will post some of the information there which we can verify. So as I mentioned earlier, we can learn more about the content of the args parameter by looking into the documentation. So I'll quickly jump back to my documentation and head over to the product event section in the serverless features. And if I search for onTicketCreate, we have the boilerplate code, and we have the sample payload with defining mentioning the attribute with a description. So this is the payload that the app will see or the app will get, and you will use this to send it to the third-party API. So let's jump back to our application. For the sake of simplicity, I will stringify this body and then pass this. It's good to log errors. And for this URL, I am going to use RequestBin. So let's head over to RequestBin. It's very easy to create. So RequestBin, it gives you a dummy URL endpoint, which can be used as a mock third-party API here. Oops. Cannot name it. I don't know why. Okay, doesn't matter. We'll just copy this and go back to the code, paste it here. Can have a custom endpoint, new ticket, and what have we missed here? Okay, since this is going to be a post, change this to post, and we need to define the options. So let options be blah 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 blah. I'll quickly refer the documentation for how the options is supposed to be. Request API. It's a JSON object and can include the following properties. Okay, it can have the headers, the body, and static IP, if you want it to be. So here's the sample code associated with that as well. So since we're just going to need the body parameter, we can specify that over here. My content is already JSON stringified. Everything looks fine. We're using request API to post to this endpoint with this options object, and if it's success, we'll get an OK. If it's not, we'll get an error. So let us see how it turns out. I have my app already running, so I just need to go to the simulator page. We are dealing with on ticket create event, and I will hit simulate. Boom. Let's jump back. Okay, we have OK. Let's see what we have in RequestBin. And there we see we have the sample payload logged here successfully, indicating that the API call was successful. Now that is cool. So instead of logging the entire payload, you could actually log the name of the request, or whatever that seems fit. This could be an API call to a third-party CRM or marketing app or whatever, and this endpoint can change accordingly. So in this case, the endpoint is hard-coded, and we don't want hard-coded things to be in our application, especially if we are packing and deploying in production applications. So we need to make use of iParams in this scenario, and let's see how to do that. Generating iParams is quite simple. So we'll just stop the execution, and the command that we need to use here is FDK generate, and you can generate the iParam. So in this case, API URL, and I want it to be blah 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 an URL. So here we go. Do I need another iParam? No. This should be good. iParam, no. Yes. Cool. So if we look at the iParams.json, we have this new iParams created. Of course, we can look at the documentation and then create these things manually, but we have the FDK which supports the generate command, and that can be used to generate not just iParams, but you can also generate OAuth config or other necessary files for the application. And we have the API URL, and if you remember, we also have the test data, in which case we can give this probably as test data for local testing. And this is how we use it. If we just paste it here, this will be substituted in our app during local testing, and however, this won't be substituted in our app during deployment to production. This will be not taken care of, or this won't even matter, and the app would show an installation page which accepts this which accepts this iParam with the display name and the description. We'll see how it works soon. But now that we have successfully added the iParams, we need to tweak the app a little bit. We will change the hard-coded part, and we'll make use of the iParams directly here. I'll probably remove this, clean this up a bit. And remember what we saw in the documentation, the args parameter contains the iParams, and since I have my iParam here, which is API URL, I can provide that here, and this will get substituted when the product callback is invoked, and the args parameter will contain the iParams, which get substituted here, and I don't have to worry about the hard-coded values anymore. So during the app installation, we will receive an app installation page which shows the fields which are mentioned here. So in this case, we have only one field, which is API URL, and it's of type URL, which will have this description, and it's required. We generated using the FDK generate command, and once we provide the value and hit the install, this will be stored for the application configuration. So whenever the app is getting executed, and whenever the ticket is getting created, this callback is fired, and the callback logic has the iParams accessible by the args parameter. So we can put this to test immediately by using the FDK run command, and let's go to the simulator. We will select the event which is on ticket create, and I'm going to hit simulate, and there we go. We see OK, which means we have the new ticket created. Okay, one strange thing that we noted here is the URL. I can remove this, it's already getting redundant, and now it should be fine. Alright, so we have seen how to add an iParams to the application, and we saw it work. So now it's time to pack the app and deploy it to the account, and then we'll see in real time how it works. So I'll quit the run, and I have a neat coverage report here. It's good to have all green, just saying it's good for public apps. Okay, now that we are going to have this app as a custom app, not a public app, and I'm going to use the FDK pack command to pack this. Oh, we have an error, and it's good to pay attention to these errors because there are certain rules that your app needs to follow in order to be successfully packed. I've made the changes. Let me try to pack it now, and perfect. So we have the app packed in the dist directory, and we just need to upload this to the developer portal. I'll head over to the Freshworks developer portal, which is simple and easy to. You might have seen this earlier as well. So can log in as developer, and once I am in the developer portal, so these are some of the test applications which I created, and I can add a new app. In this case it's a custom app, so I will choose this and I'll go ahead and upload. So it's in the blah 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 test serverless, and here we go. So we'll enter the app name here, serverless app test. Of course you need to have a meaningful overview and description, since this is a sample app. We don't care about that at the moment. And here we go. We have hit publish, and in about maximum 30 minutes, I don't think it'll take that much time, it usually takes 5 minutes or so, we will have the app reflected in our account, and we will see how to use it. Okay, as you can see here, our app is published, and if we head over to the apps section, you can find it under the settings and apps, and we need to go to the custom app section. Probably I will disable these things at the moment. If we go to the custom apps, and here we have our app, Serverless app test, published 4 minutes ago, and if I install it, and this is what I mentioned earlier. So the iParams.json renders this installation page where we have this field that we defined, the description and the field name, and since this is an HTML, since this is an URL field, it won't accept normal input, so this has to be an URL, and we'll copy the RequestBin URL and then paste it here. And similarly, you can have different validations in the iParams.json file, and hence it's recommended. And here we go, we have the apps Serverless app installed, and every time a new ticket is getting created, we should see something in RequestBin. So let me delete everything here. Poof, gone. It's waiting for its first request. And let me create a new ticket really quick. New ticket, contact, probably use my same name, and then I need the horn of Choramun. Okay, this is some weird feature request. Poof, it's created. And ta-da, we have the ticket created here with the content as we saw in the local testing. So what happens is, every time a new ticket is created, our serverless app, which listens for the new ticket product event, invokes the handler, and the handler sends the request to this particular endpoint, which we define in the iParams, and we receive this dummy request with the payload of the ticket create event, and that is how we see the subject, description, and all of the associated fields with the new ticket creation event. So as I mentioned earlier, this could be API calls to third-party products or SaaS applications that you want to integrate, and that can be done seamlessly with serverless apps with product events. And we will see more of that in the upcoming videos.